So fear is your friend. Let's talk about it. Hello, I am Will Thunderhawk here for Thunderhawk Coaching. This video is titled Fear is your friend and here's why. And we're going to jump into that. So you might think, why? How is fear, my friend? Fear sucks. Fear is scary. But we're going to talk about fear as an emotion today because I think it's kind of OP in an interesting way. So, fear exists for a very specific reason, but unfortunately in our modern lives it doesn't feel as particularly useful as it did historically. So, historically, fear existed because it protected us. Fear increases our body's adrenaline and cortisol, and that allows us to leap into action immediately in the moment. It's really helpful at suppressing feelings, understanding kind of how you're feeling and where you're at. Isn't really useful when there's a lion about to jump on you and eat your face. So, understandably, developmentally, we figured out that those chemicals would be helpful, naturally produced in our body, to help us respond when we suspect something is going to attack us, and if it does, then we will have adrenaline and cortisol to shoot glucose into our muscles and allow us to move at haste and speed away from the thing we are afraid of. So, in modern life, unfortunately, we don't have tigers to run away from. So, we feel this fear. And this fear is often like a predicting type emotion. We suspect something ill or negative will happen to us because of something in the future. But we have this adrenaline and cortisol kind of buzzing in our body. And our biology is geared to release calming hormones when we know we're safe away from the danger. Dopamine, serotonin, think oxytocin, all of those kinds of neurochemicals. But in real life, we don't use the energy. So if we sprinted, which I recommend you doing if you want to help navigate your own fear response a little bit better, that'll trick our body into thinking, oh, okay, the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems are rebalanced, so we're good. But that's my little primer on fear. Fear is our friend because fear is ultimately trying to keep us alive. But in the modern world, we find ourselves laced with our adrenaline and cortisol levels of fear blasting through us at all times. And that leaves us feeling drained and exhausted because prolonged exposure to these chemicals leads to being overly tired. It leads to weight gain. It leads to health conditions, being pre-diabetic because you're constantly boosting your glucose level. Certainly happens, documented cases of it, my friends. So, if fear is your friend and it makes you fat, or it makes you sad, or it makes you overwhelmed, or it makes your heart explode, how is that good? How is that good? Well, if you didn't feel fear, my friend, you would not be alive today, I suspect. Those who don't feel fear typically don't really manage their behaviors as well. And fear helps us be more empathetic. Fear helps us be more compassionate to others and empathetic, and improves our ability to understand emotions generally, right? If we're afraid of things, we know that we have to collaborate with each other and we need each other. Again, oxytocin is a really great bonding chemical that shoots into our synapses when we are hugging people and when we are close and connected to people. And that was selected for a survival bias, right? When we collaborate together, we can build fantastic things, regardless of where we're from, regardless of what we do. So fear in a lot of ways is there to keep us alive, right? Unfortunately, certain powers that be like to use that against us and use our fear against us. Fear, in high doses of constantly being afraid, that can turn into intense extreme trauma for a lot of people, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder, depending on what you've experienced. And all of that sounds like a lot, right? That is a lot. That's tough. But fear is something we work with instead of against, and I want to talk about that a bit more. So a lot of people are like, run away from the thing that's scary because there's information that we don't have about the thing. So there's fear about the thing. Fear is kind of absence of information in a future projection. So we assume the worst for survival bias, right? If we assume it's going to be a tiger and we're always primed for a tiger, we're more likely to survive a potential tiger attack. Most people in the world don't experience tiger attacks that often at the moment, but the processes are there. And when we look at our fear response, we learn a lot about where we're at, a lot about our deeper mental health challenges, actually. And the reason I say fear is your friend is because actually fear can be a fantastic segue into really understanding some of your deeper problems, following the fear down, linking it back to experience, understanding how the fear is serving you and protecting you from a lot of the awful things in the world. What is your boogeyman? What is your serial killer over your shoulder? What does that look like? Because if you've ever seen horror films like I have, the scariest part of the film is actually before you see the monster, and that's by design, right? Again, because we have the absence of detail of the monster, right? If we see the monster, we know how fast it can move, what it smells like, if there's any patterns in how it stalks. But if we don't have any of that, we have to prepare for the worst. It's natural. So with fear, what do we do with fear? What do you mean work with fear? I think work with fear by leaning into it and being curious with fear. So when you experience a lot of fear, it's actually really hard to experience a lot of other emotions. So if your nervous system's constantly in a fear state and you spooked all the time, you're not going to be able to think straight. You're not going to be able to feel other emotions because a lot of adrenaline and cortisol numbs all your feelings into nothing. So regulate those feelings out first, right? Because when you're in a fear state constantly, you can't do anything but be scared. You can't do anything but feel like everything is a threat in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. You live a very narrow life. You live in survival mode. So talk about that first. Hopefully have a trusted relationship to work with the fear, because you will learn so much about yourself in an exploration of that fear. And anyone that does that gets a huge kudos from me. But yeah, that's fear, and that's why it's your friend, because it's there to help you. It's there to keep you safe. It just needs to take the right role in your body at the right time. If you want to learn more about this, reach out to me via my website. If you want to conquer your fear a little bit, you come talk to me. I'll help you out. But I've been Thunderhawk Coaching Will, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.